I think we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today. This is our last speaker series event of the semester, and we're very happy to have two fantastic speakers today that will be sharing their STEM and research trajectory. So as is our custom, please welcome our moderator, Panos Vandres. Panos is a graduate student himself in the immunology lab at Stanford, and we'll just go ahead and get started. Take it away, Panos.
Thanks for the introduction, Olivia. My name is Panos. I use he, him pronouns, and I'll be moderating today's panel. I'd like to thank Olivia and the MESA program for all their help in putting together this speaker series. I'd also like to thank Wendy and Alex for serving as our third pair of panelists of the year. So today's panel will start with Wendy and Alex each spending about 10 to 15 minutes talking about their career paths and their current work, and then we'll transition to about 30 minutes of Q&A. Please feel free to submit questions at any time by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and then I'll read them out loud at the end for Wendy and Alex to answer. So now we'll jump right in, starting with Wendy, and I'll hand it off to her.
All right. Hello, everybody. Let me just share my screen. All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, Panos, so much for that introduction, and Olivia for inviting me here. I'm really honored to talk with community college students, as I was also a community college student once myself. So yeah, I'm going to share a bit about my journey. It's more of a personal story than about the research, but I will touch on some research topics, and you're totally welcome to email me or ask questions about research. So yeah, so I'm a graduate student in the developmental biology PhD program at Stanford University. And I'm working with Gerald Crabtree. So a central question in developmental biology is how a single fertilized cell is able to give rise to a complex organism like a human being that can think and feel, and in some cases make art. Growing up, I grew up on a hillside on the outskirts of Los Angeles, and I became fascinated with the seemingly magical process of developmental biology by observing and asking questions about the world around me. So for instance, we had chickens, and I wanted to know, well, how do these eggs turn into chickens? That's so crazy. And then our cat had kittens, and I was like, where did these kittens come from? How did this happen? And while it's probably better that I don't have a picture of this, I also would go out into the hillside and collect bugs and butterflies and study their life cycle in a jar. And I was so into this that I even brought this jar of bugs to the movie theater, because I would rather look at the bugs than watch the movie. And I ended up accidentally dropping my bug jar in the movie theater and spilling bugs everywhere. So that was cool. But yeah, so I ended up, perhaps unsurprisingly, pursuing my PhD in developmental biology. But my path to get here was definitely not straightforward. And as I was putting together this timeline of my life, I guess, I was kind of horrified to realize that some of you might have been born the year that I graduated from high school. So yeah, but anyway, after I graduated from high school, I started attending community college at Pasadena City College mostly, but I also took some classes at LA Mission College and also LA Valley College, so that I could, fulfill my graduation or transfer requirements. And then I transferred to UC Santa Barbara and earned my bachelor's of science in biology. Afterwards, I did industry research for about 4 years, and I moved to New York City after that and worked in academic research as a research assistant at the Rockefeller University, during which time I also earned my master's degree in biology at Hunter College. And then finally, I started my PhD here at Stanford in 2014. So perhaps like some of you, I come from a low-income family. My parents came to Los Angeles in the 1980s to make it in the arts. My mom is a painter and my dad wanted to be an actor. We rented a little mica miner's cabin, which you can see in the background of the picture to the left, at the base of the San Gabriel Mountains in a city whose claim to fame, along with being where they shot The Sons of Anarchy, was also as the meth capital of the United States. So our schools were not very well rated. And because of this, my mom substitute taught in a wealthy city that's similar to Menlo Park or Palo Alto or Atherton, so that my sister and I could get a good education. And I'm very grateful, and I think she's a hero for doing that. I also realized that I'm very privileged because I was able to have that education. But because we were so much lower socioeconomically, I definitely felt like an outsider and an imposter. And this is a mentality that I still sort of consciously have to overcome. So because of my family background, I decided to attend community college. As I mentioned, I went to Pasadena City College and took classes at Mission and Valley College. I also worked as a lifeguard at the YMCA while I was in college. And then because I was very interested, I knew I wanted to be a scientist and I was interested in research. I took some opportunities to do research, one of which was a 1-unit plant biology class at Valley College, and the other was studying pine marten range with the US Forest Service, which was like a summer internship. And these experiences helped me learn about what I like and what I'm interested in. And I realized that I wanted a little bit more relatability or interaction with my subjects than studying plants. And then while I did really enjoy field work and going out into the forest and hiking and feeling tired at the end of the day, I felt like the work was very routine and then repetitive. So I wanted actually like more complex problems to sink my teeth into. And so when I transferred to UC Santa Barbara, I joined the laboratory of Thomas Wines, and he studies intracellular signaling mechanisms that go awry in polycystic kidney disease. And I was really excited by this research. I felt like the problem was complex and could be dissected, and I just really, really wanted to sink my teeth into that. And so I also felt that it was really thrilling to be able to do an experiment that I knew no one else had ever done. And then also to be part of, a group of people that's pushing the boundary of science forward. So that's what really, really thrilled me about research and specifically molecular biology. And while I was super excited about my research, and even I was excited about my coursework, I did carry unresolved childhood wounds, including my parents' divorce. And this had my anxiety level at a high point in college that also was inhibitory. So yeah, I was dealing with that, but I would also say that anxiety at a lower level can also be beneficial. And I feel like it might help me with my problem solving and also making connections. So it's not all bad. But at that time, like I said, it was inhibitory and I was able to just get by and my grades were about average. Because of this, I was afraid that I would never get into a PhD program. And so I decided to pursue a career in industry instead. And I started by interning at Amgen, which some of you may know is a very large pharmaceutical company. There, I worked on crystallizing a protein drug that increases bone density. It's now on the market. And this experience helped me get a job at a startup company called Serogen after I graduated. This company makes highly fluorescent protein polymer molecules that are very fluorescent. So my job there as one of 3 people in the lab was to purify this novel protein polymer conjugate, which was actually very challenging, and I had no one to help me. So I just had to figure it out on my own. And this was actually really good for my growth as a scientist, because I had to learn how to solve problems and troubleshoot and gain confidence in my own abilities and trust myself. So then Sirigen relocated to San Diego, and my husband was still doing his PhD at UCSB. So I went to a different company called Gas Reaction Technologies, which is now called Reaction 35, where I did completely different research. I ran gas phase chemistry reactions to convert methane into a liquid hydrocarbon. And some of you probably know that methane is it's a greenhouse gas that is even worse than carbon dioxide. And in oil drilling, places where they're oil drilling, they'll just torch the methane so that it'll get converted into carbon dioxide because they can't use it. So there's kind of a renewable energy aspect to that research that I did like. And I would say that these experiences greatly expanded my knowledge of biochemistry and chemistry. They also taught me research skills, problem-solving skills, as well as how to be part of a team that's working towards a common goal. And also, importantly for my own personal growth, working in industry gave me the time and financial means to work on my own healing, which I did do. By the time my husband and I moved to New York City for his postdoctoral studies, I was feeling pretty limited by industry research, which again is pretty routine and it's goal-oriented for the company, and it's not really discovery-based in most cases. So I really missed the thrill and creativity of discovery research. And so I applied for a research assistant position in the laboratory of David Alice at the Rockefeller University. So you probably don't know who he is, but Dr. Alice was among the very first to show that chemical modifications to the proteins that package DNA, called histones, can directly affect whether a gene is turned on or turned off. And in his lab, I studied how chemical and physical changes to chromatin, which is the protein packaged form of DNA, shape gene expression, both during development and in response to neural activity. What most excited me was that we found that neural activity induced histone exchange, which is shown here, is a process that is required for neural activity dependent gene expression, as well as memory. Our findings impressed upon me the fundamental importance of chromatin in behavior, which is something that I currently study. In addition to my research in the Alice Lab, it was the kind, humble, and brilliant scientists that I worked with, David Alice and my postdoctoral mentors, Kyung-Min No and Ian Mays, shown here. And they nurtured my growth and supported me and encouraged me, even encouraging me to go back and get my master's degree while I was working full-time in the lab at a nearby college that I would go to class and come back, and it was no problem. They also gave me the opportunity to present at conferences and write papers. So I'm incredibly grateful to them for nurturing my growth and yeah, just, encouraging me to be my best. So yeah. And then when I came to Stanford, I joined the laboratory of Gerald Crabtree, who is another kind and gentle and extremely creative scientist. Among many things, Jerry's known for discovering that neurons have a special chromatin remodeling complex called NBAF, and that this is important for neuronal function. And so during my PhD, I studied this NBAF complex, and to briefly summarize what we found that mutations in an NBAF specific subunit cause an recessively inherited form of autism spectrum disorder, which you guys might know is it's a social disorder where people have defects in social communication They also show restricted or repetitive behaviors. So we found, that mutations in this subunit of the NBAF complex cause autism. And we found that mice that have the same mutations have an autism-like phenotype. So they show behaviors that are characteristic of autism, like social avoidance. And then lastly, working with Robert Malenka's lab, we found that a small molecule drug that activates a serotonin receptor could rescue social behaviors as well as hyperactivity in the mouse model of autism that we are studying. But not only did it rescue autism behaviors in our mouse models, but we also tested for other autism models, including an environmental model of autism, and it rescued in all cases. So this could be a potential broad treatment for autism spectrum disorder. And so, what I've learned along this journey is to be kind to yourself and prioritize your healing. I guess this is also me speaking to myself in the past, if I were a community college student. And so I would encourage you to test out your interests and follow whatever makes you light up inside. And I would say also, even if it seems like there is no path, there is always a path, and you have to find it. And sometimes you have to make that path happen. And a very important thing I've learned along the way is to work with people who will challenge you to be your best self, and who are kind and trustworthy, and who you know will champion you. And lastly, to quote David Alice, the most important thing is to have fun. So that's all I have. Happy to take questions about any of it.
Thank you so much, Wendy, for that wonderful presentation. We already have a couple questions in the Q&A. We're going to go ahead and move on to Alex's presentation first and then do the Q&A, but feel free to submit more questions for Wendy and for Alex as he presents. But for now, I'll pass it off to Alex.
Hey everyone, I think you should all be able to see my screen now. If you can't, just let me know. Alrighty, so great presentation, Wendy. I think my slides are a lot more simple than that, but yeah, you really did well in the graphics game. So I just wanted to give a quick introduction about who I am. I'll talk a bit about my research journey, but I also wanted to talk about just like also my personal journey and how I got here, because I think that it's easy to look at, people who are at grad school and think that they have it all together, but in truth, we're all, just trying to figure it out as we go along. So a little bit about me. I am a Vietnamese American. My parents came over to the US after the Vietnam War, and the picture on the top left is my dad at a refugee camp in the Philippines. And I think that's something that is really important to me because I, try to keep in mind what my family has sacrificed to get me here, and the struggles that they've been through. So that's something that's always been really motivating to me. I have a picture of my family up in the top middle there. And I was born and raised in the Bay Area. I was actually born at Lucile Packard Hospital, which is the children's hospital here at Stanford. So it's kind of funny that I'm back here now, kind of coming full circle. And after I grew up in the Bay, I went to Bellarmine College Prep for high school. There I participated in speech and debate, and that was something that's really important to me because I think that it's one thing to have ideas and it's another thing to be able to communicate them. So I think that through debate, I got a better perspective of how to express myself, how to get my ideas across, and I gained a lot of confidence in speaking my mind and advocating for various things. So just a plug for, public speaking and getting comfortable with talking in front of an audience, because I think it's such an important thing to do, especially if you go into science. In terms of my personal interests, I'm pretty interested in weightlifting. I just got back from the gym. I feel like it's something that helps keep me well. And I'd like to echo what Wendy said. I think wellness is so important throughout your journey because, if you're going to grad school, it's definitely a long journey, and there are some days where you'll feel better than others, but it's always important to have those things that kind of keep you grounded and keep you, being yourself. So for me, it's like weightlifting, cooking, And I also love to like play and watch football. So yeah, I try to like always make time for something that I like to do every day, regardless of how busy I get. So my research journey then went, or actually started at Duke, where I did my undergrad. So I worked in Ryan Baugh's lab, looking at development and metabolism in these small worms called C. elegans, and you'll see them at the bottom left of the screen. We worked on the insulin signaling pathway and specifically the metabolism downstream of that pathway. And what we were interested in was carbohydrate metabolism, specifically this sugar called trehalose, which is a disaccharide, or essentially two glucose molecules stuck together. And what we found was that when the worms are starved, instead of breaking down trehalose for energy and using those glucose equivalents for metabolic pathways, they're actually building this up. And so we hypothesized that it's a stress protectant molecule. And there's a lot of data from other organisms that suggest that. So that was kind of my introduction to research. And I think, what I learned through that process was research can be a pretty difficult road. I think I spent 4 years in the lab, and my first 2 years were just negative results on negative results. And we would ask a question like, does fat metabolism substantially change when the worms are starved? And the answer was no. And then we were wondering about glycogen. The answer was no. And then we finally did this big screen looking at RNA levels in worms, and we finally found some hits in carbohydrate metabolism. So that clued us into something in that pathway. We did some literature reviews and found out that trehalose is upregulated in invertebrates when they're stressed out. And that ended up being true in C. elegans. So I spent 4 years looking at a microscope at these small worms, and it really got me interested in research, because I think there's a lot of beauty in being, like what Wendy said, the first person to ask a question and someone who contributes to the compendium of knowledge that we put together through science. I think it's cool to it's one thing to read textbooks and to absorb what other people have figured out, but it's another thing to actually add your small piece to it. And it's really satisfying and can also be very thorough and very exhaustive. There are definitely a lot of long nights in lab, but I think that what I learned from that experience is you need to find something that you care about, and you need to be in a group that you really care about. And for me, I was really, really well supported. I had a phenomenal graduate mentor, John Hibschman, who's now postdoc at UNC. And his support just meant a lot to me. So I'd say when you're looking for labs and you're looking for research, it's definitely really important to find people you get along with, because a lot of research day to day is pretty similar. It's like pipetting, moving small liquids from here to there, and running these various machines. But it's the people you're interacting with and the questions that'll motivate you. While I was in college, I also, since I was at Duke, I was a huge Duke basketball fan. That was the middle left picture is me at one of our home games. I think that was against Miami. And I actually got on the front page of Bleacher Report for that. So that was pretty cool. Duke basketball was a really good time. And just again, it's important to be happy where you are. And I think there's always a pressure to do as much as you can, but you should also enjoy your time, right? If you are just focusing on getting ahead the whole time, you're not going to enjoy the present. And it's really important to, have time to yourself every day and have time where you're just being present in the moment instead of always looking ahead. And another thing I got really involved in college was mental health advocacy. Like Wendy, I've also had, personal experiences with depression and anxiety. I think it's really common. Actually, I think there's a statistic that 1 in 4 college students face mental illness. And so that was something that I got pretty involved in. I feel like growing up in the Bay Area, at least when I was in high school, there wasn't a lot of talk about mental health and mental illness, even though it was pretty clear that there was a problem in our community with how much pressure is put on students. And as I went to college and learned more and more about that space, I got pretty passionate about it. And I think that, it's important to find people that you trust and talk about mental health, to check in with your friends, or even to go to your friends when you need help. There's a lot of stigma surrounding mental health and mental illness. And I think that part of breaking that stigma is talking to each other, being vulnerable and being honest, because we all go through tough things. Everyone faces challenges. So it's important to take care of your mental health. No matter how much work you have, or, what you're looking forward to in graduate school or beyond, you have to be healthy and well in order to do well. So yeah, that was something that became really important to me. Just like supporting people going through a tough time, helping to break down some of the stigma and talking about these, talking about mental health, which can be really difficult and really personal. So that's something I'm really passionate about, and I hope to carry forward with me. So after I graduated, I wanted to take a couple years to kind of decide what I was doing, because I really love research. And my mentor at Duke, Ryan Baugh, was actually telling me that I should go for an MD PhD or maybe a PhD. But I always felt like I wanted to do medicine. I think early on, it was just really appealing to me because I like the idea of really using knowledge to immediately help patients. And I love the personal side of medicine. I found that whenever I was shadowing at the Duke ENT clinic, I found myself just so enthralled by personal stories, and then using what you know about someone and what their priorities are and combining that with medical knowledge to come up with treatment plans to that, really help them live their life to their fullest, or honestly just being there for people when they're going through tough times. Those were all things that were really appealing to me. So I took some time off. I spent 2 years at the NIH in Bethesda, Maryland, doing research on Vibrio cholera, which is the organism you can see at the middle right side of the screen. It's a bacteria that's kind of comma-shaped. That's where the name Vibrio comes from. And you might know it as a pathogen, but it's actually a really interesting bacteria because unlike most bacteria, which have a singular chromosome, Vibrio is part of the about 10% of bacteria that have 2 chromosomes. So it's a good model system for understanding chromosomal replication and segregation. So I did work on like basic science work on DNA replication there, and you can see my lab group at the bottom right. I think I'm a huge advocate of taking gap years. I think that it's when you're in the middle of like high school and then college and like grad school, you're always thinking short term, right? Like right now on my plate, I'm thinking about the 3 lectures that I missed this week that I have to make up. I'm thinking about like what I have to do in lab tomorrow. I'm thinking about like various extracurricular obligations I have. And it's really easy to get caught up in the day-to-day. But when you have some time off where maybe you're working 9 to 5 and you can go home and relax, it gives you a lot of perspective. And I found that when I was at the NIH, I actually had time to read books and talk to mentors and friends and really like figure out what I wanted to do, which gave me clarity going forward. Yeah, I just think like it's so easy to get kind of myopic when you're in the rush of high school and college and all that, and having time to actually think about what you want to do and read a book on what life is like as a physician, or read a book about what life is like as a researcher, and then have a lot of time to yourself to think and reflect. All that can be really, really powerful. So I loved my time at the NIH, and yeah, happy to talk about like taking gap years and what that looks like. And honestly, I don't even like the term gap years because I think they can be extremely fulfilling. It's not like you're having a gap in your life. In fact, you're probably growing more as a person in those years than, or at least I felt like I was growing more as a person in those years than I did in my undergrad, just because undergrad was like go, go, go. And then during my gap years, I was actually able to explore who I wanted to be and think about, my journey in a more holistic manner. So that was what I did before I came to Stanford. And when I got here, well, let's see, I can talk about my med school app journey. I think that, it's easy to look at a student who's at a school like Stanford and think, oh, wow, like, things must have gone pretty well for you. But I actually applied to 33 med schools and got into 3 of them. So yeah, I went like, batted less than 10% really. And I think it was difficult at first when I was going through my application journey because I kept on getting rejections on rejections on rejections. And I got to a point, I remember in December, where I had gotten rejected from UCLA, which was the last UC that I applied to that got back to me. And it was all bad news. And I was talking to my friend Kenzie and just like really doubting myself. I was like, should I even be a doctor? Like, I don't know why I'm in this. It just felt like medicine didn't want me. But I ended up getting a call on January 15th that I got into Stanford, and it was definitely my dream school and has been ever since I got here. And so, if you're thinking about medical school or honestly any graduate school, it can be a tough road in terms of applications because it's really competitive. But at the same time, like just know that, like everyone faces those challenges, and that, even if things aren't going exactly the way you planned, that's really normal and that's okay. And a lot of people face a lot more failure than success in these applications because they're super difficult. So I'm a second-year med student now at Stanford, and yeah, it's kind of cool coming full circle. So I have a picture in the bottom middle, which is Lucille Packard Children's Hospital, where, you know, I was born, but now I go back and I shadow, and I've gotten to do a couple procedures there. I really like being at Stanford. I feel like the environment here is really phenomenal for mentorship, both from the medicine side and also the research side. On the medicine side, I feel like our faculty are really willing to teach, and they're excited to teach students. And I think those are huge pluses. I think that, you know, at some institutions, people have a very hierarchical notion of medicine where, you know, attendings barely even notice medical students. But I think at Stanford, people do really care about your development as a person and as a medical student and eventual physician. So I think that's been phenomenal to have that kind of mentorship. And then in terms of my research here, I do CAR T immunotherapy work with Crystal Makel's group. And in the top right, I have a picture of my debate coach, Mikhail Meyer. I got into medicine because I lost Mr. Meyer to brain cancer. He was diagnosed with glioblastoma in my junior year. And I remember when I was a high school student, you know, I had this notion that medicine and biology had gone so far that we would have cures for everything, right? Like, I was under the impression that cancer was curable. And I still remember the day when I looked up for the first time glioblastoma multiforme and saw that it had something like a 5% 5-year survival rate. And I just thought that it was so unfair. Mr. Meyer was just an incredible guy. Like, I remember when he was going through his cancer journey, he used the awareness of his cancer to raise money for Lucille Packard, not for himself, but for the Children's Hospital. And that was something where I just thought to myself, you know, our community and our world would be so much better if people like Mr. Meyer are still around. And even if pre-med or medical school or residency gets hard, even if research is hard, it's so much better to be on this side of things than the other side of things. Like, when you're a researcher or a physician, like, you choose to be there, right? Like, we have a choice to become researchers and scientists and doctors, but the patients who are on the other side of this don't have a choice. And their journey is much harder. I mean, I think as hard as like organic chemistry gets, anybody with brain cancer would easily trade, you know, their predicament for mine any day. So that's something I try to keep in mind. Like, at times when you're doing research or you're studying, it can be difficult to really find that why or that motivation. But at those times, it's really helpful for me to take a step back and think about why I got into this all. Which is to eventually, hopefully, come up with cures for people like Mr. Meyer, or, you know, to just be there for patients, because that's what really matters. So I guess, you know, all that is to say that it's super important to find your why in research and medicine. It's really important to know what's going to motivate you on days when it gets tough. And for me, it's the memory of Mr. Meyer and another friend that I actually lost to brain cancer that gets me through it all, because yeah, sometimes it gets tough, but I just know that the other side of it is much tougher. So to talk about my research here at Stanford, I do CAR T immunotherapy. It's I got introduced to immunotherapy, especially for cancer, when I was at the NIH. I think the NIH was really moving towards personalized medicine and immunotherapy. So I got to learn about all this, like this whole field at the NCI, which is the National Cancer Institute, and they would often have talks on immunotherapy. So when I came to Stanford and I was looking for a lab to join, I actually ended up finding the Makel lab, and turns out Crystal Makel, my PI, used to be a PI at the National Cancer Institute, where she was the head of, I think, pediatric oncology, and she started a lab here where we work on this really cool therapy called CAR T. So CAR T stands for chimeric antigen receptor, and then it's a T-cell based therapy. And basically what you do is you create a cell that can specifically recognize proteins that are on the surface of cancer cells and preferentially attack those. And it's a pretty exciting therapy. It's been shown to work pretty well against liquid tumors or blood cancers. like lymphomas and leukemias, but we're trying to create CAR T cells that can work better in a solid tumor setting. So tumors like brain cancer, which our lab is pretty heavily focused on. So we're working on pediatric brain cancers such as DIPG, which is a really devastating cancer, and GBM as well. So it's really cool to be able to come full circle and work on therapies that could potentially help people with these devastating brain cancers one day. And what I do specifically is kind of looking at epigenetics in CAR T cells. So that's basically looking at how, instead of how DNA is changed, how I guess like DNA's or proteins are expressed. So it's less about changing specific genes, but more looking at how those transcriptional profiles are altered, and how we can use that to our advantage to make CAR T cells that are more able to resist the deleterious effects of the tumor microenvironment. And my project specifically looks at this transcription factor called FOXO, and how modulating that could potentially help with CAR T cell therapies, especially in solid tumor settings. So it's pretty exciting work, and it's an amazing opportunity to be able to work on such a novel and translational therapy. I think that coming to lab every day and motivating yourself is really easy when you remember that you're working on a treatment for people who don't have many options right now. And then I just like to echo what I said before, which is just like finding the right people and finding the right lab environment is great. I felt very fortunate in the Mako lab to have such great coworkers, and especially my mentor, Evan Weber, he's a really phenomenal person and a great person to talk to about science and life. And I feel super, super fortunate to have this opportunity to work in a super exciting space that has the potential to revolutionize cancer therapy, but also to work with people who really lift me up and encourage me. I mean, I think that like Wendy, I felt a lot of imposter syndrome. Again, like my family's a family of refugees. I have cousins who never finished high school. And so it's kind of difficult at times to feel like I belong at a space like Stanford, where most of my peers, their parents are doctors or professors. But, having people who encourage me in lab and beyond has been something that gets me through a lot. And I just feel really, really blessed to be here. So that's a little bit about me. I'd love to have hear your questions. Happy to talk about anything about my journey. But hoping all the best for you all. And thanks for letting me speak to you.
Thanks so much, Alex. That was an awesome presentation. We're going to open it up now to Q&A for both Wendy and Alex. So feel free to submit questions in the Q&A as we go along. I'm actually going to start with a question that Wendy, you already answered in text, but I want to make sure that everyone hears the response. So can you just answer this question verbally? How did you learn about research in community college?
Well, yeah, I didn't know about opportunities. I remember somebody posted something maybe about like an opportunity to go to like Washington, DC, but I couldn't go away to do research. So that I didn't even apply for that one, but that was only, I think, because my professor like posted on a door or something. And then like doing research, like I knew I wanted to do research in undergrad and at community college, but there just wasn't an opportunity on campus. So when I went to Valley College, they were offering like a 1-unit research class that one of the professors was working on their PhD and wanted, to give students an opportunity to do research, but also get help like measuring plant leaves. So that was what that one was. And then working for the Forest Service was something that I had an opportunity, or that I guess I found out about because my aunt worked for the Forest Service. So yeah, but we're actually trying to start, new research programs for community college students. And that's an effort in our department that I've been spearheading. So along with Tenny, who's presented recently as well for this series. So if you are interested, email me. I can send you information about programs that we have here at Stanford for research for community college students.
Great, thanks so much, Wendy. I'll continue to another question. So can each of you tell us what a day looks like for you right now?
Yeah, I could go. I don't think I really have a typical day because it kind of depends on, what my schedule is with class and stuff. I think one nice thing about Stanford is they offer us a lot of flexibility. But if I had to say, generally speaking, in the mornings we have class, so maybe like 3 hours of class, and then I'll have lunch, and then hop over to lab. Or some days, if we have our clinical instruction, I'll go over to the hospital, which is always my favorite part of the week when I get to talk to patients and do physical exams. Again, it's like the most grounding thing to talk to real patients and realize that, I'm working on a knowledge base that can help people like this one day. And then in the evening, it's either catching up on class or working on extracurriculars. I'm also TAing biochemistry, so I might have TA meetings or I might be reviewing material to teach the students. And then, late at night might be an episode of Squid Game or something, or, something else that makes me happy. Yesterday, I just listened to music for like an hour, which is really centering. I feel like it's like near meditative sometimes to just like sit back and listen to a full album without doing anything else. So yeah, I think I always try to have like something at the end of the day to look forward to and something where I can just decompress and let my brain rest a little bit. Some days you can't do that, but yeah, I always try to find time for that.
Yeah, and then for me, I don't know, I would say I also have not a very defined schedule, especially because I'm very close to the end of my PhD. I think when you're starting out in your PhD, it's you have more of a schedule. You're like actively doing experiments. My paper is published now, so I'm kind of like thinking about next steps and working on maybe a review or something like this. So I have a lot more flexibility at this stage probably than when you're just starting. But even so, like my mentor and my group, there was never any like restrictions on, you have to be in by a certain time or there's just a lot of respect, and it might be specific to my lab, but I feel like it is more of a broad thing that I've noticed at Stanford, that graduate students are treated more like colleagues as opposed to being like minions. So that's a really nice thing. I feel really lucky to be here. So I think I tend to work sort of in bursts also. Like I'll plan a big experiment and then I really, really focus and like prepare for that. And I'll get that done and then I'll take a break and then, focus again. And that's just how I work. But I think you have to find like how you work best and go with that.
Thank you both, and congrats, Wendy, on publishing your paper. Our next question is, what kept you going when you got rejection from schools/programs after applying?
Well, I guess I'm not sure. That might be for me. I think so. For me, the first time I applied, I knew my application wasn't that strong because I had, average undergraduate grades and I hadn't done any coursework since then. So I couldn't like argue like, oh no, I can succeed, So I think actually going through the process of interviewing and also being in that environment with these other researchers, like I knew I could do it at that point. I needed, to figure out how to get there. And so it ended up just motivating me to like, strive harder to be, to optimize my application, and it worked.
Yeah, I guess I can talk about this as well. So yeah, I was talking a bit about my medical school app journey. And for me, I got only waitlists and rejections between, I guess, May when I applied and January when I finally got into Stanford. It was just like all bad news. I had applied to like 4 of the UCs, got rejected from all of them without even getting an interview. I had interviewed at 2 schools, gotten waitlisted, interviewed at another, gotten rejected. And it was just like a lot of bad news. But I think there's two things that kept me going. One, which is, I think it's sometimes like hard to remember, but I think you can really turn to friends for this one, is you're not a different person because a school accepts or rejects you, right? Like when I eventually did get into Stanford, that I wasn't smarter after that call. I wasn't kinder after that call. I wasn't a different person after I got into a school. And the same as if you get rejected, like you are still the same person. And if you have values you care about, if you have goals that you care about, those don't change, even if a school can't see, what's true inside of you. And I think in that regard, talking to my friends was really helpful. Like the one day after I got waitlisted at Brown and I talked to my friend Kenzie about this, she was like, you're going to make a phenomenal physician because you care about people so much. And obviously there's a lot more to being a doctor than just caring about people, but I do think that's a good starting point. And so that was one thing. It's just like trying to keep in mind that when you're submitting an application to these programs, like they really don't know that much about you. These decisions are so random, and a lot of them are coin flips. So it's kind of unfortunate, but that's one thing you keep in mind. And then the other thing for me was kind of thinking about how like it wasn't just about me, right? Like I'm not trying to become a doctor so that I can be a doctor. I'm trying to be a doctor so that I can help patients one day. And if that's my goal and I have like that clear why, like if you have that thing that motivates you and you care a lot more about that than failure or embarrassment or, getting rejected from 30 medical schools, then you can get through it, because the opportunity and the privilege of helping patients one day with your knowledge, or helping patients one day just by being a nice person, that is such a, to me, that's such a motivation that I don't really care what I have to go through to get to it. I think that, talking to mentors, thinking about your life, reflecting on stories, journaling, finding things that really motivate you, and always keeping those in mind is that's the goal. It doesn't matter what I have to go through to get to it, is, I don't know, something that really motivated me. Actually, during my med school app journey, I have a picture of Mr. Meyer on my wall. And for me, that's the thing where anytime it gets tough, I'm like, this, helping people like Mr. Meyer is the reason I want to go through this. And it's very easy, again, to convince yourself that matters. Have that North Star, that one thing that guides you.
Thank you both.
I just want to quickly echo that a little bit, just to say, for me too, I don't think I was meant to be a doctor, but I definitely felt like science is being my best self. If I'm doing science, I'm being my best self, and that's how I can best serve the community. So I think that was something I realized later on, self-actualizing and rising to be the best I can be isn't just even motivated for me. It's because I can serve better that way. So I just wanted to share that.
And I'll ask one last question. And if there are any other questions from students, please feel free to submit them. So you both mentioned struggles with mental health during your academic and professional journey. What would you recommend to students as they try to deal with some of those issues?
Yeah, I would say prioritize your mental health. It's hard to do at times. I think that in the world, I was going to say institutions of higher learning, but honestly, in the whole entire world, it can be really hard to step back from it all and say, I need to take care of myself, because for some reason, people consider that selfish. It's not. You need to be well in order to do well. I remember I had an episode in my junior year of college where I was just feeling super unmotivated. I didn't care about school. I didn't really care about lab. I found it difficult to even motivate myself to go to the gym. And I kind of knew something was wrong. And I talked to my graduate mentor at the time about it. I was like, John, I think I've been depressed before, and I feel like it's coming back. And he basically was super understanding, just told me that I could take time off. And again, I'm really fortunate to have a mentor who was willing to do that for me. I don't know if that's always going to be the same for everyone. So I was pretty fortunate there. But I think like speaking up for yourself and taking time off if you need it is really critical. And then, you know, even if you think about the big picture, as I've said, right, like you need to take care of yourself, like, and that means like physically, mentally, emotionally, so that you can perform well. So even if you are just thinking about like the next step or getting ahead and stuff like that, like it's still important to be present for yourself. And I think, you know, small things can make a big difference in your wellness. For me, I found that journaling was really helpful because I struggle a lot with overthinking. So when you have to put something down, or like you have to actually write down your worries, they don't seem as big as they are in your head. That's something that's kind of specific to me, but like, you know, when you actually distill it down to like, what am I actually worried about? And you see it on paper, it can be tangible and feel a lot more manageable than when you're just overthinking in your head. So that was one thing. And then just trying to make time for myself. Like even when I was in the midst of med school applications and I was super busy writing essays, I still made it a point to like go to the gym every day for an hour. And that was something that I did just to kind of like give myself time off and do something that like made me who I am and makes me happy. And I think regardless of how busy you get, like find even like 15 minutes to do something you love and do something you're excited about that might not be like productive, so to speak, but it just keeps you happy. That's so important to do.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I did go through actually like kind of a abusive work situation right before I went to Rockefeller, and I didn't talk about that experience, but this professor that I worked for was, you know, just always hounding me for new results and would find me during lunch, and I just never could eat because I was always, you know, stressed and trying to please her. And so a kind of a turning point for me was to actually leave the campus and go off campus to get lunch and like make sure I eat a healthy lunch and take care of myself. And it totally changed my life actually to do that, like just prioritizing myself and choosing myself in that was hugely impactful. And I still do that. Like if I'm having a tough day, or even if I just need time for, you know, I'm an introvert, so I need more alone time or something, I honor that. And it's, yeah, that really helped me a lot.
Well, thank you again so much to Wendy and Alex for talking with us today and answering all those questions. We really appreciate it. And thank you all for coming today. I'm gonna pass it back to Olivia if she'd like to share anything for the end of our session today, but otherwise, thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you, Panos. Thank you, Wendy and Alex. This was such a great presentation, and thank you for answering some of those questions that I know our students could really identify with, and it's great for them to hear someone telling them their experiences. So thank you again, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We will have the recording posted on our website if you want to access it later. And we hope that next semester you could join us for our speaker series as well, once we have them. Thank you.
I don't want to take too much time, but I was wondering if we could maybe like get to the one question about imposter syndrome real quickly, because I think that's something that's pretty common. I don't know if that's okay. I don't know if we have to end strictly at 6.
Oh, I'm okay if you guys,
yeah, go for it.
Go ahead, go for it.
Takes too long. I would say, okay, imposter syndrome. One thing that one of my lab mates, Tara Murthy, told me, which is really helpful, is like, if you're at a space, you're already there, right? Like they're not going to rescind you. So one, there's kind of this like fatalistic view of you can't be rescinded. So even if you are an imposter, who cares? But I think, you know, that doesn't resolve the underlying root thing about imposter syndrome. Something that I've thought about kind of as I go through medical school and look forward is, you know, at the end of the day, like things like admissions, And all those decisions are kind of arbitrary, right? Like whether you go to a certain medical school or another is like, it really comes down to chance sometimes. But what doesn't come down to chance are like your character, what you bring to the table every day, and like how you treat the people around you. And so I always ask myself, like, you know, even if getting into Stanford was a mistake, like even if they admitted the wrong Alex Stone, can I make my school better? Like, can I make my community better? Can I make my lab better, like through intellectual contributions and working hard? Most importantly, can I make my patients' lives better? And honestly, those things only require like effort, commitment, and kindness from you. And if you go through any institution, and even if you don't feel like you belong there because you don't feel like you're smart enough or whatever, if you are so nice that everyone's lives is better, if you work, you know, so hard that the lab loves having you around, if you are so kind that your patients are like, thank God for this, you know, medical student who was the only person who listened to my story, then you belong to be there. You deserve to be there and you belong there. And all of those are in your control, right? Like the way you show up every day, the effort you give, the kindness you bring, like that's all in your control. So keep that in mind, like be the best version of yourself, and you absolutely deserve to be in the spaces that you inhabit.
I would just add, like, don't compare yourself to others. Try, or at least try not to, because everybody's different. You know, everybody's going to have strengths and weaknesses, and I think part of, you know, not feeling or feeling like an imposter, which is something I do struggle with, is because it happens when I compare myself to someone else, and I'm like, oh, well, they have those skills that I don't have, and I'm not good enough. I'm not on their level or something. And but the reality is that I have strengths that they don't have. And that's how we all are. We all have strengths that others don't have, and we all have something to give. So, so yeah, try not to compare yourself, and try to see the value in your own strengths and in others' strengths.
I think I was muted.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Wendy and Alex. Those are just such important things to emphasize for imposter syndrome, which is, I think, one of the things many of our students feel like. So thank you again. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight.